We were told the 21st century would be written in Mandarin, that China's rise was an unstoppable force of history. But while the world was distracted by the smoke of conventional wars, a silent execution was being carried out in the dark. It wasn't a war of borders, but of nanometers. This is the story of the Silicon Siege, a cold-blooded, multinational operation designed to do one thing: starve the Chinese dragon of the one resource it cannot live without. By the time you finish this video, you'll understand why the mandate of heaven hasn't just been revoked, it's been deleted.
To understand how you starve a superpower, you have to understand what a superpower eats. In the 20th century, it was oil. In the 21st, it's silicon. Every move Beijing makes, from their social credit system to their hypersonic missiles, is powered by a resource they cannot fully produce at home. China spends more money importing microchips than they spend on oil. Think about that. The lifeblood of the dragon isn't flowing from a well in the desert, it's flowing from a laboratory in the West. But as of 2026, the taps haven't just been turned down, they've been ripped out. The West has initiated what strategic analysts are calling the Silicon Siege. This isn't a simple trade ban, it's a total caloric restriction of the Chinese state. By coordinating with the Netherlands, Japan, and Taiwan, the United States has effectively surrounded China with a technological iron curtain. They aren't just stopping the sale of high-end AI chips like the H100s, they are banning the very machines that make the machines. Imagine trying to bake bread when you've been banned from owning an oven, buying flour, or even speaking to a baker. That is China's reality. Without Western extreme ultraviolet lithography, China's domestic chip industry is stuck in the past, forced to try and fight a 5G war with 3G tools. Beijing is currently facing a technological famine. They have the factories, they have the engineers, and they have the ambition, but they are missing the 1 nanometer-sized ingredient that makes the entire system work. And as their stockpiles begin to run dry, the dragon isn't just slowing down, it's starting to starve.
But the siege goes deeper than just blocking new shipments. The West has moved from starvation to something far more surgical, a digital lobotomy. You see, a high-end AI cluster isn't like a car that you buy once and drive forever. It is a living, breathing ecosystem that requires constant feeding from Western software, proprietary libraries, and specialized engineers. When the US and its allies pulled the plug, they didn't just stop the hardware, they revoked the intelligence license. In 2026, China's most advanced data centers in Shenzhen and Hangzhou are effectively becoming digital graveyards. Without access to CUDA updates or the global firmware ecosystem, the massive NVIDIA arrays China spent billions to smuggle in are losing their edge. They are running on zombie software, outdated, unoptimized, and increasingly vulnerable. And here is the part that keeps Beijing's generals awake at night: the human firewall. In a move that stunned the global tech community, the West didn't just ban the tools, they banned the talent. U.S. citizens and green card holders working in Chinese chip firms were given a brutal choice: quit your job or lose your citizenship. Overnight, the brain trust behind China's domestic breakthroughs vanished. Thousands of the world's brightest engineers walked out of Chinese labs, taking decades of know-how with them. The result is a superpower with a failing mind. Beijing is trying to run a 21st century surveillance state and a modern military on a brain that is being systematically disconnected from the global network. They can see the world through their cameras, but they can no longer process the data fast enough to react. The West didn't have to invade China to win, they just had to make sure China could no longer think. When a human body is starved of a single vital vitamin, it develops scurvy. The body looks fine on the outside, but the connective tissues, the things that hold everything together, begin to dissolve. That is exactly what is happening to the Chinese economy in 2026. For decades, China's growth was built on a simple promise: give us your factories, and we will give you the future. But as the Silicon Siege tightens, that promise is rotting. Without the calories of high-end Western chips, China's manufacturing sector, the very spine of its $18 trillion economy, is developing a terminal technological ceiling. Beijing has just set its lowest growth target in over 3 decades, barely scraping 4.5%. This isn't just a bad year. This is the sound of a superpower's engine seizing up. Global investors, once desperate to get a piece of the Chinese miracle, are now performing a mass evacuation. They can see what Beijing is trying to hide. You cannot build a new quality productive force when you are banned from buying the tools to build it. The most brutal part? This tech starvation is triggering a debt explosion. Local governments, already drowning in trillions of dollars of hidden debt, are being forced to dump their remaining cash in desperate failing domestic chip projects. They are throwing good money after bad, trying to replicate 40 years of Western innovation in a 24-month window. The mandate of heaven was always tied to prosperity, but in 2026, prosperity is tied to silicon.
As the factories slow down and the tech-led growth vanishes, the social contract is fraying. The West didn't just break China's computers, they broke the financial machine that kept the dragon fed. And now, for the first time in 40 years, the dragon is truly, desperately hungry.
As the front door to the global silicon market slams shut, Beijing hasn't just surrendered, they have gone underground. To survive the siege, China has activated a shadow supply chain, a desperate, high-stakes network of shell companies, smugglers, and ghost tankers designed to bypass Western export controls. In 2026, the electronics markets of Southeast Asia have become the front lines of a new kind of war. We are seeing high-end AI chips being traded like narcotics, repackaged in generic boxes, stripped of their serial numbers, and moved through a labyrinth of third-party countries before finally arriving in the hands of Chinese military researchers. Beijing is effectively trying to power a superpower on black market scraps. But here is the epic twist. The West knew this would happen. Instead of just trying to block the shipments, the US and its allies have turned the shadow market into a trap. They are allowing leaky supply chains to exist, but with a catch. Many of the chips making it through the cracks are being tagged with digital beacons, or worse, are intentionally hardware crippled. China is spending 5 times the market rate for chips that might not even work, or that act as Trojan horses for Western intelligence. Every time a Chinese ghost ship docks in Shanghai with a cargo of smuggled silicon, Beijing's generals have to ask themselves, is this the fuel our military needs, or is it a Western tracker? By forcing China into the shadows, the West hasn't just starved them of hardware, they've poisoned their trust in their own equipment. The dragon is eating, but it's eating from a poisoned well.
The silicon siege has done something that decades of diplomacy couldn't. It has forced the world to choose a side. In 2026, the global map is being torn in two, and the dividing line isn't drawn with soldiers, but with supply chains. We are witnessing the birth of the Pax Silica, a US-led technological fortress that now includes India, Japan, and Australia. By integrating India into this alliance, the West has found its alternative China, a massive labor force and a growing tech hub that is being fed the very silicon Beijing is being denied. This isn't just a trade shift, it's a strategic eviction of China from the global future. But the starvation is creating a dangerous fallout. Middle powers like South Korea and Germany are caught in the crossfire. They are being browbeaten by Washington to move their factories out of Chinese soil and into the West, incurring hundreds of billions in losses. For these nations, the silicon siege is a double-edged sword. They are safe inside the Western fortress, but their balance sheets are bleeding. Even within the BRICS alliance, the cracks are widening. While Brazil and South Africa talk about multipolarity, they are watching the reality of 2026. You cannot remain neutral when the technology that runs your country is being weaponized. The West has effectively told the world that the price of admission to the future is a total de-risking from China. The dragon is being isolated in a digital ghetto. Its fair-weather friends are realizing that aligning with a starving superpower is a recipe for their own stagnation. The West didn't just surround China, they made it too expensive for anyone else to stand next to them.
As we stand in 2026, the question is no longer whether the West can starve the dragon, but what a starving dragon does next. The silicon siege has successfully fractured China's technological spine. By cutting off the nanometer nutrients of high-end AI and lithography, the West has locked Beijing into a technological ceiling they cannot break with conventional tools. But history teaches us that starvation often leads to one of two things: total collapse or a desperate, radical evolution. In the high-tech labs of Shanghai and Beijing, we are seeing the first signs of that evolution. Denied the silicon of the West, China is pouring hundreds of billions into lane-changing technologies, photonic computing, carbon nanotubes, and AI-driven chip design platforms like Qimeng that autonomously generate processors. They aren't just trying to catch up to the West anymore, they are trying to bypass the silicon era entirely. The mandate of heaven is now in a state of quantum superposition. On one hand, the West has proven that the global future still runs on Western-controlled infrastructure. On the other hand, by pushing China into a corner, they may have inadvertently created the world's most dangerous and resilient technological competitor, one that has nothing left to lose. The siege isn't over. It has simply entered its most volatile phase. We are no longer living in a world of shared progress, but in a world of Pax Silica, where the energy, the data, and the intelligence of the future are guarded by high walls and digital locks. The West has changed the rules of the game. Now we wait to see if the dragon will starve in silence or if it will find a way to burn the house down.